Thank you very much. What a wonderful moment to be here to share with you some ideas about architecture and the city of ideas. Now, to me, one of the most important things about a city is its memory. And I had a chance to implement the notion of memory in Berlin. What do you do when you have extinction in front of you? Murder of Jews. What happens? That's what I started to do. Plot an invisible start, a matrix of connections, and create a building that is radical, a building that doesn't follow existing typologies because it moves across the abyss. The building is next to a Baroque building, so it's a historical site, but I did not connect the buildings in any obvious ways. There is an overture, really, in the underground where the three roads intersect and take you to different places. The first road takes you to a dead end. The dead end of that history of Berlin, the Holocaust. It's an emptiness. There's only a sharp light, some hope at the very edge of space. The second route takes you to the Garden of Exile, because Berlin is exiled. People are exiled from Berlin. The city is different today, and it has columns which are fed by water and earth, but the vegetation is far above you, far beyond what you can reach. And then the third road is the road of continuity, across the absence, across the extinction, towards a future city that takes that extinction, takes that hope into its own sense. And the museum does not have really any windows. It has a map, mapping those invisible connections between Germans and Jews across the divide of the city, and creates really a different refracted light, a kind of map to an invisible Berlin. And then there is the audible part of Berlin, the void. It's not an atrium. It's a disconnection across the center of the building, in which really I completed an opera by Arnold Schoenberg, who wrote it in Berlin. He could not finish the opera because he was dismissed from his professorship as a professor of music in Berlin. So I completed the opera, Moses and Aaron, in the footsteps of the visitors across the echoes of that void. I was also able to implement another building. They needed new facilities, so in the court of the Baroque building, a new social space, and across the street, a new building, part of an old Blumenhalle, the flower market, which has the Education Academy, which has 150,000 visitors. People are interested in the history of the city, and I inscribed on it something in Arabic. It was written in Arabic, Judeo-Arabic, Hebrew. It's also in English and in German, by Moses Maimonides, the great Jewish philosopher, almost 1,000 years ago, who said, "Hear the truth, whoever speaks it." That's the message of the museum. Hear the truth, whoever speaks it. And there it is, how one can reinvent a sense of a city, a sense of place, with a building which is not very big, but brings a totally new understanding of the memory of a place to itself. Well, singularity is something I'm interested in, and in a very high-density city in Singapore, I was able to create a neighborhood. Now, how do you create a neighborhood in an extremely dense place, in a place where every square meter is taken up? So I created, really, on this ship canal, on this former industrial part, a promenade to take people across towards and to preserve nature, to create buildings that really give every occupant, every citizen, a really fantastic space. The buildings are not extruded, they are doubly curved, so that every floor occupies a special position in space, and those crowns of the buildings will be completely green, and the bridges are green with the amenities for the people who live in this new neighborhood. Now, how do you do that? Since you have thousands and thousands of apartments, how do you give singularity? How do you express the fact that individuals are not just statistics, but need a beautiful place, a beautiful view, a sense of nature as well? And that is really the art of creating cities with high density that have a quality of beauty, quality of living, quality of amenities, where even the cafes, the restaurants, public facilities available on the boardwalk are available to the public at large. I think this is an important sense of creating a community. And of course, the aim of such an exercise is to save as much nature as possible, not to occupy nature with buildings, but to preserve the landscape, to bring the nature vertically to the tops of buildings, and to create really an icon, which is not only an icon of a public building, but an icon of a new neighborhood. Overture, music, because I was a musician, I was interested in this project in Dublin to create a huge new theater, the Grand Canal Theater, on the old waterways, old canals that were disused in the 19th century, and to create a public place that brings people. Now, that's the main thing. How do you do it? Public-private partnership. I created 2 large office buildings. One of them will be occupied by Facebook very soon. And it is a street, they'll give you the sense of what this place used to be, called Misery Hill. So there it is, the theater with its public space, with fantastic open spaces, with a lobby that is compressed, with the fact that really you can create a mega theater for a very economical sum. It's not an expensive building. It's the private-public partnership creating that glass curtain and reviving the sense of an abandoned area. And I think that's something that has become a hub of the city of Dublin, a great place. Politics is very important in every city. Politics is about ideas. I had a chance to implement a very large building, the Military History Museum of Dresden, of Germany. You remember that Dresden was destroyed in 1945 in the Allied bombings of World War II. So what do you do with a place like that? I restored the armory, which was a 19th century armory. It was already a museum, German museum, Nazi museum, Soviet museum, East Germany museum, and now in a new democracy, a museum for a democratic Germany. You see the new insertion. How do you treat an old building? I inserted a new form into it, a very different form, which points really, that triangle points to the place from which Dresden was destroyed, and the form of the triangle is the triangulation of the 3 points from which the city was itself erased. And that is the experience. There it is. The horizontal armory tells you the story of chronology, and then there's the interruption between 1914 and 1945, the catastrophe of militarism and destruction of Germany and of the world. And so the building is a dramatic new place to bring not only buffs of war and people interested in equipment, but in a democratic idea that the military is responsible to the public. You have the exhibits that cut through the column structure, that ascend in these diagonals towards spaces that ask questions. Why are animals used in wars? Monkeys, bees. How to show equipment not as something aesthetic, but as something that is deeply philosophical and threatens our life. How to show the slave labor. How to show the things that fall from the sky, how to show toys. And of course, as you ascend, you see the destruction of other cities, Rotterdam, Coventry, Wieliczka, from Dresden, and then you go out and you're suspended over that building. You're projected, because the public is what's important. People suspended in front of the building, not behind old walls. And there it is, the contrast, the dialogue. And I think that's what is important, that architecture should not just answer questions, should ask questions. And those are the questions which are being asked in this building. Questions as, why do people follow fanatical leaders? Why do people follow and march in step with crime? That is part of reviving the sense of a military in a democracy, and also giving a new sense to the city of Dresden, a Baroque and great city. Now I come to a very complex project because it's about rebirth and resilience of New York. And often I'm asked, where was I on 9/11? You know, that was a day after so many years of working in Germany that the Jewish Museum opened its doors. 9/11, 2001, after so many years, the Jewish Museum opened its door and also closed its doors after the attacks, because of the uncertainty. And I thought a lot about what to do, how to bring life back to Manhattan, how to create memory foundations, and how to use the site in a completely different way. Rather than building megastructures and large buildings, I decided it was about public space. We should never build where people perished. We should create a public space of memory with the footprints of the buildings and distribute 10 million square feet of density in buildings that are shaped around the site on the periphery, so that they are lower, so that it's not 1 or 2 buildings, megastructures, but buildings that create a better streetscape, and symbolic buildings like the Freedom Tower, 1776, the Declaration of Independence, and go all the way to bedrock. And of course, it's a highly political project, because you have the families of the victims, you have the governors of New York and New Jersey, you have the Port Authority, you have money, you have private investors, you have architects, you have path trains, you have mayors of New York. How do you go from a sketch to an idea? And that is the first sketch, and there is the most recent perspective of the realization of the project. And of course, it depends on bringing this model, this sense of loss, but also of the future of New York together. There's the plan. And of course, the underground is very important, because all the connections, all the towers, all the security, everything has to be in the underground. And I was very moved by this incredible slurry wall, that foundation, a dam and I touched it, and I thought, this ground is sacred. It's not just any ground. This is a ground that belongs to people. This is a ground that cannot be built upon. And that ground is now part of the September 11th Museum, which will open in the springtime, and you will see the power of foundations exposed. You know, usually foundations are built in order to put something on top of it. But here I expose them so that people can have the spiritual sense of what it means to make a foundation in a city, what it means to destroy the city, but also it's still the foundation of the site as we see and we go through the materials, the fragments of history, and we ascend towards the plaza. And that's a big public space. Out of the 16 acres, I decided half of the site should be public space. And we have the footprints with the names. We have the waterfalls, which screen the sound of busy streets of New York and give a sense of intimacy to an experience and bring nature to this grand area of New York. And I created an additional space called the Wedge of Light, determined by 2 hours of the attack, 8:46 a.m. on that morning when the first tower was struck, and 10:28 when the second tower collapsed. And that is the space in light, the space determined between the center of the PET terminal and tower number 2. The PET terminal is built, it's going on, and it's moving forward. And you can see that I was inspired by the Torch of Liberty, because the buildings stand in a grid, but they are part of a composition that recalls the Torch of Liberty. I see it from my office here, and it is a site which is work in progress, but it represents really a meaning for me of New York. My parents were immigrants. I came to New York as an immigrant from Poland, and I have to tell you, my parents would never be working in those gleaming buildings at Ground Zero. They, like most of New Yorkers, would be in the subways, on the streets of New York, and that's what I wanted to do, to create a place that means something to people of New York, not just the lucky ones who are on the site, but all New Yorkers, all Americans, all people of goodwill, because after all, this date changed our world. 3,000 people died, but it was people from all over the world, 90 countries. So that is what it's about. It's about the Statue of Liberty. It's about freedom, the importance of democracy, of tolerance, of the true values of America. Give me you're tired, you're poor, you're huddled messes yearning to be free. And that is what you'll visit very soon in New York. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.